And good afternoon. This is Newport from D101 Games, and I'm here with Paul Mitchener, author of many role-playing things, Liminal, Age of Arthur, yes, Age of Arthur, Crucible Dragons for Open Quest, and now the upcoming Beyond Dread Portals, which is a standalone D20 Fantasy game of world hopping that we are kickstarting. Well, not kickstarting. Sorry, we are crowdfunding. We'll go on to what I mean by that later on. In June sometime, 1st of June. So we're going to have a bit of a chat this afternoon about the game and what we're doing there. So hello, Paul.
Hello, Newt. It's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm breathless. Yeah, just come back from the dog walk and running across the fields, and now I'm in this virtual Zoom room of Zoom with Dan Barker's wonderful image that he's done for the Kickstarter page, which I asked him to do it in such a way that I think kind of nicely sums up what the game's about.
Absolutely. It's a dandy stabbing someone with an axe in the knee. I mean, what more could you want?
That's
right.
But
it's a lovely piece of art, isn't it?
Yeah. No. I've been a fan of Dan's for years, since he did work on a Glantham fanzine called Tales of the Witching Moon. And he's worked on me, came to work on Monkey. And this is the first one of the. He's been doing his really nice black and white ink pieces, and he just came up with this. I just said, I want to see a dread portal. I want to see something a monster coming out of it, and the character is a dandy who's a more Renaissance style fighter than the usual medieval or Dark Ages type character. And he came up with this. So So what? So my big question. So Beyond Dread Portals, it's a bit of a D&D variant, isn't it? What? Why do we need another D&D variant? Can you tell the folks back home why do we need?
It's a D&D variant, but it's also my D&D variant. So although you've got the action and adventure type aspects, as illustrated in the art, that's certainly there. There's an emphasis on, I suppose, exploring worlds and societies more than exploring dungeons, and also emphasis on sort of politics and intrigue. And the other thing is the rules are pretty recognizable from D&D, but they're customized really to that setting. If there's something going on in the setting, it's probably reflected in things like character abilities.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to really do, to bring that element of setting forward and basically play with world hopping. I
remember the original pitch that you were saying very much. It was against Paul pitched this against. It'd be 10 years ago.
It's a long time in the writing, but
it is.
We've both been doing lots of other things in between.
Yeah, but the original pitch I'd just done. I think it came about the first edition of Crypts and Things, which was in 2012.
Yes, the Crypts and Things was definitely an enabler for this, because again, I looked at what you'd done. I think it was the Swords and Wizardry rules, and how you'd customised that to seriously reflect this sort of swords and sorcery setting,
and sort of also.
And I thought that's really sort of came through.
Yeah, also sort of 80s White Dwarf. That's my D&D.
Yeah,
that really sort of slightly gritty and quite house ruled. I remember house because all the authors of White Dwarf were original D&D fans. In fact, they were it's like Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, who did the whole fantasy thing, game books, and were quite heavily. Well, Ian Livingstone for many years was the editor of White Dwarf. They imported original D&D to this country, into the UK. They went to Lake Geneva to one of the early Gen Cons. They met Gary Gygax, Greg Stafford, and they just because they were the only Europeans there, they hoovered up all the licenses for all the role-playing games for the UK and Europe. But Crypts of Things was modified to reflect the sort of style of D&D that was played out in White Dwarf and other things. So there is that to it. But you say it goes back further than that, sort of when you were playing sort of second edition AD&D, that sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was sort of almost my house setting. And again, like the White Dwarf sort of editors here, of course, things got seriously house ruled. And naturally, well, this maybe reflects some of those house rules, but of course it's morphed into something completely different there. So it's more a memory of doing that rather than based on.
Yeah, that's a big
They
thing.
weren't really playable except for one particular group with me as GM.
So yeah, it's that's something that plays a large part in this sort of nostalgia. It's your memory of it, and some designers are very upfront about that. They'll say, "Yep, this is how I remember it," or "This is how I'd like to have played that game." So I'm now presenting a house rule version, and some people are sort of like still a bit more. Oh, this is literally what I played, and they'll do a wonderful retro clone. So Beyond Dread Portal isn't a retro clone.
No.
But
it's almost idealized. It's nostalgia. It's sort of a case of I wish I'd had those rules back when I played it.
Yeah, no, that's what really struck me. That me and AD&D second didn't really get on 100%. It felt very much like it was obviously TSR's attempt to clean up first edition. But also to take it forward as well, give it a bit more mass appeal, and I didn't feel that I'd rather just would have had a nicer, cleaned up version of first.
It was changed and a mess. What was glorious about second edition for me, and utterly glorious, was some of the settings.
Oh yeah. That was something that was definitely something that was coming
nostalgia coming in there
in first, and I think that was a big thing. That again, Paul pitched this as his sort of Planescape moment, and I thought I knew, that Planescape's huge. I never kind of touched that. I was more of I think the settings I played in were Ravenloft, which I had a lot of time for. Dark Sun, there's a bit of chunk of Dark Sun in
I mean it's the Swords and Sorcery setting, really.
Yeah,
it's
not quite. Swords and Sorcery,
and
psionics, and sort of have about 3 characters because they're going to die quite quickly. It was a weird one, and I don't think I ever really sort of gave it as. Yeah, played a couple of sessions, but I don't think it got us a full campaign because we'd moved on. I think this is getting another.
I think that's true. Yeah.
For play straightforward D&D, there's other things in Games Workshop to play, and I think that's another nice thing about this that I call it. Well, when we were talking about it and how to sort of sell it about a year ago, the idea that it's post D&D, it's sort of like, and this is sort of like me being a little bit cheeky as well, kind of selling to people. But there seemed to be a couple of years ago, people are playing 5th edition, which still has its D&D roots, despite having lots of fun indie sort of stuff, and it is still set up to go down the dungeon. And people start saying, I want to do something else with that. And I think Open Quest for me, my Deep Centaur game, is very much that's a tribute to the style of Deep Centaur games, which was my first venue out of D&D and into a bigger, wider world where the skill set sort of supporting. What was your sort of move away from D&D? All that sort of very down the dungeon sort of.
So, I mean, probably my first big move away from D&D was Call of Cthulhu.
Right.
And that led to things like the percentile rules.
Yes.
And things like that, sort of looking at other alternatives within fantasy.
So, yeah.
So similar, not identical, but similar.
No. I think I'm trying to think. My first percentile game actually was Judge Dredd. So which is very much Warhammer Light. Warhammer.
Yeah, I mean the sad thing for me is that I missed Warhammer at the time. I like it now, but I missed it at the time.
So it's one of those ones where I can't foresee myself saying, "You miss Warhammer, you first edition. Let's play a game or a short campaign of Warhammer first." And I can't, because there's just so many sort of inconsistencies in the rules. I looked at it and I thought recently, and the very small sort of 3-column pages, and it's just like, whoa, there's a lot packed into it, but there's a lot of inconsistency that a modern game would probably go, no.
And I think that's the appeal of these types of modern games. I mean, any of the old games needed a lot of bashing around to play, lots of house ruling. That's part of the fun, the sort of DIY element. At the same time, a modern game, which I hope this is just something you could just play as is on the table. Bang.
Yeah, I there was again 5 years ago. There was a big. You'd read on the forums that this assumption. Oh no, probably more about 10 years ago, when Burning Wheel was coming out, all those strong crop of indie games. There was this whole one of, oh well, I get a game and I'm going to have to house root it straight away, and indie creators start saying, "Thank you. Can you just play the game as written and then?" Don't just automatically assume.
You're right. That is the dividing. I mean, Burning Wheel was definitely one of the first proponents of that, especially for a more complicated game. But that is the dividing line between indie and old school. I think an old school gamer is happy to sort of wants to hack around and expects to, whereas the modern school of gaming saying, "Well, no, if you can't play that game as is, it's broken."
Yeah.
And there's elements where I've got sympathy with both, to be honest.
Because this is very sort of the nice thing about it is it's had that modern rules approach. It's got it's still, there's a GM, there's the players, the group of explorers rather than adventurers, who are all members of the Explorers Guild in the setting. Tell us a bit about the setting before I went on.
So the setting, so you've got basically the city of Is, which is a sort of little pocket dimension of its own, has portals to other worlds. Is is the capital of basically a multi-world empire. Of course, it's pretty rotten at the core. There's an undead monstrosity called the Autarch. His agents stalk the streets and eat people. There's all sorts
the
of
Emperor
like
is undead in this game.
Yeah, basically, yes, exactly right. And then, of course, it doesn't do much in the way of rulings. There's lots of rivalries between various guilds. And then the worlds themselves aren't, solid in the rule of this. There's reasons to overthrow it. There's movements against that. And each of the worlds has sort of its own character there as well coming in.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one today. The rule, it's all. So you've got the Is itself, which is a big ring world. It's a city on a ring world, and the districts move around. So it's not even sort of like solid there. Is it too much of a spoiler to say what happened with the previous emperor? I suppose everybody knows that. But basically that the Autarch, which is this undead creature, beamed in from another world and beamed into the Empire's palace and killed him. And then sat on the throne, and then been sat on the throne.
I'm in charge now.
Yeah, and has his undead circle of bodyguards to protect it. But otherwise, these very ambitious political houses who run the various guilds, they're left to their own devices. And unless they really directly oppose the Autarch, it's quite happy to do that.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
For reasons that Paul doesn't even go into. It's just that that's something you can explore and play, and perhaps be the subject of high level play. But
I mean, that's partially a thing as well. I mean, I think there's almost an expectation that you're going to go in and change the setting. With all the rivalries, with all the sort of movements against Lycian conquest and things like that, it's unstable.
Yeah. And
it is going to change, and the players.
So that's the home city. Home city is this big sort of Renaissance style fantasy city that moves around. That's quite an interesting idea. That we're never going to do the big, huge, badass map of because it's districts and buildings just move around. That's something I found when I've run it as being quite an interesting one, that you have buildings and landmarks that are quite distinct and, big and overblown. And they are sort of like floating areas amongst the sprawled back streets where all the skullduggery can happen. But when you go for the Dread Portals, these places are, some of them under control of the Empire through alliances, but it's all a bit unstable. I was thinking of sort of the idea of the Explorers Guild. Is the guild that all your characters belong to, all the player characters belong to. One of their basic jobs is taking tourists and people.
Yeah, that's your edition, wasn't it? Sort of thing. Yeah, sort of conducting them basically.
Yeah, and these places aren't safe places to go for your man or woman on the street. There's one, I think, even one of the more stable worlds. There's a place called the Lion Empire. Is that?
Yeah,
where they're all warriors and they're all fiercely rah, and they're actually at war with their neighbours. So that's one of the better places. Let's not talk about the sort of the world that is Erebus is basically a series of caverns and tunnels.
No, that's not safe at all.
And
you're not allowed to go there anyway. But
yeah, and then there's another one that's off limits where the HR came from. So yeah, there's the book is full of adventure hooks. There's some tables, isn't there? Some counts.
There are some tables, yeah.
To create, if you similar to Crypts and Things, where you have the region guides and you have tables to roll upon to come up with adventure ideas. And there's,
my aim was to have no location that was, well, I suppose, boring. Nothing, but no location where there's no conflict and nothing going on.
Yeah, even if it perhaps looks that way, but it isn't, and so this, when I was assessing this, it's like, Paul sold it very much like, I say, it was Planescape, and it's obviously not Planescape because it doesn't require all the weird alien races. That
it's significantly less weird than Planescape in that way.
But everything,
it's a human-centric setting.
It's human-centric, but there's lots of twists on your typical fantasy races that, without being too obscure and too esoteric. Like, for instance, there's goblins in the book, but they're just sort of forest earth elemental almost, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, they grow from fungus.
Right, there we go.
Of course they do.
And so it's the book. It's about 250 odd pages now, the draft without art. So I think we are going to push about the 300 pages side of things. It's designed to be sort of pretty much self-contained. I'm a big fan.
It'll be complete in one book. I mean, that's anything else that comes out is a bonus rather than a necessity.
Yeah. And this is an important point. The campaign itself is just going to focus purely on that book. It's going to kick off 1st of June, and then I'm kind of at the moment thinking sort of October is the delivery date. We're going to have a pool of artists, so to do all the art, and that's laid out and editing. Paul's already handed me the draft, and it's all good to go. And I'm not planning any supplements. We'll see how this really is. Let's see how this goes. I think we both got a couple of adventures that might.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if it happens to sell 1 million copies, that's great, and then we'll be doing some supplements in the future.
Yeah. But I think the scale of what D1 I'm on is, and I've done it in the past, and me and Paul had a chat about this earlier, is where you do stretch goals. So I started doing Kickstarter campaigns probably 10 years ago, which I started on Indiegogo, Crypts and Things, and then OpenQuest second. And then I moved, I think it was River of Heaven was my first Kickstarter. the at the time it was outrageous. This was like 10 years ago. You would have whole game lines. You still get this whole game lines being funded, and for a small operation, it's just me basically with a few authors and artists. Suddenly, you can get the temptation is go, yeah, we'll have another stretch goal of 500, 1,000 quid, and that bosh, there's another book, supplement.
I think there's some of the really successful ones sort of set a bad example that smaller creators find it hard to follow, right? That's what's happened, isn't it? Yeah, looking at, say, I don't know, what Evil Hat with Fate Core, that was enormously successful. And of course, they were funding a new book, every £100,000 or so. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. But of course, the smaller creators thinking, oh, we'll do a new book every £1,000, and that's not going to work.
No. And so, and I must admit, I've fallen foul of that in the past. And I still have a few stretch goals outstanding, which we're going to get this year, honest.
Yeah, I mean, the same from Liminal, but it's happening, that's okay.
But I've looked back and there's ones where I've just said, yeah, you could have a couple more pages, you can have some a shiny cover or whatever. And I think the one that worked really well for OpenQuest, and I think most of my books are print on demand from DriveThru or Lulu.com. But what's worked really well with OpenQuest and Reboot as well, Reboot the Future, which is a cyberpunk game I did back in November, which is now going through its final proof and should be out before we kickstart this. Not very long after. It's certainly zooming along. Is the idea that and this is something that's only been in the last sort of couple of years. We now have digital printers here in the UK, so I could do nicely printed books with ribbons, with sewn bindings, coloured plates, and to a much higher quality.
You can get something that looks really nice.
Yeah, and it looks so. So that's what we'll be doing here. This is the main thing. You think, oh yeah, this will come out. This will, because we do have a successful history of Kickstarter. Of crowdfunding, and then delivering the main rule book. Stretch goals might take a little bit longer, as these things do, but the main rule book quite quickly. I think we're up to about 13 projects or something.
It's definitely. I mean, you're established there, aren't you?
Yeah, it will certainly be available at some point on DriveThru or Lulu. And you might.
I've lost track.
But you won't get. This is the big hard cycle. I'm hard selling this one. You won't get the really nice, sort of printed book, and this thing's going completely silly.
Because it's not that scale of project.
Yeah,
and also, I mean, I think things like, say, take things like various bits of black and white art. I mean, look at the stuff we've got in the background. Just look at it. It's good. It evokes the atmosphere. It also evokes that sort of old school type of game that we want.
Yeah.
It's almost old. Again, it's another point where it's old school, but done better.
Yeah,
there were some very good old pieces of old school art and some that were downright shonky.
Yeah, well, I remember when even now, I get artists who have worked for big publishers, and they're basically design studios. There's a group of them.
Yeah.
And they will usually in South America they come from. They say in broken English that they'll do your whole project in color. They'll give examples. There'll be a portfolio, and you just go, that is just so lacking any soul. I don't want. And you get some of the books. You pick up some books that larger companies do, where they've obviously used this sort of get it done quick. And it's just like, it might be in color. They might have lovely layout, but they've not. Nah. Whereas I found this sort of like, I like this style. I've got books from the late 80s, early 90s where they cut a nice balance of black and white, and a bit of color here and there. Color plates is nice. Those late 80s Games Workshop editions of Stormbringer, Call of Cthulhu, where they were using stuff that they'd already done for White Dwarf covers and the rest of it. And there's a small bit of art used there, but it was done very nicely and very tastefully. And you have this art-rich book, which I wouldn't run Stormbringer again. It's a rule set, but it's fantastically laid out and a piece of work. So, shall I have a bit of chat about crowdfunding? So,
we should probably talk about crowdfunding. Yeah,
because this is a big.
Because I say we're not on Kickstarter.
No.
That's the big news.
No, yeah. We are going to be on gamefound.com, who have just opened up to all creators. They've been in beta for a while. You might go there and initially think, oh, they're very big on board games, and they are. But they've opened up to RPG creators as well. Evil Hat have just done their improvisation for gamers volume 2, and they've obviously done that as a very sort of like try it and see. They funded very well. You can look it up. I'll put a link in the description because you can still buy it because originally they were a pledge manager. The company that run it, they needed a pledge manager, so they wrote one, and it did so well for them. They thought, well, let's expand it, and now they have crowdfunding on there. I'm an ex-webs designer. That's my last day sort of job before I left to run D101. Sort of, I'd be lying if I was saying it's full time, because I'm a carer for my family, but I left that world. But I was a web developer, web programmer, and my big one of why we're no longer using Kickstarter and what we've got to GameFound is so much more user friendly for both backers and for me on the back end when I'm setting up the project. It is a joy to see. It makes the web developer very, very happy. Whereas Kickstarter has hardly changed over the last 10 years, and they're now talking about sort of Bitcoin and crypto. And I think both me and Paul, you can see Paul's face. Look at this.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be neutral, and it's not working. I'm trying to look neutral here. It's just not going through.
So I've got the practical one that Kickstarter's sort of user interface, hasn't changed much. It has, and also as more and more folk are using it, you kind of get lost in it. Monkey, for instance, got a project we like, and it was a bit.
And then things suddenly do really well with the project we like.
Yeah, it kind of times 5 your revenue, but recently there's just so much on there, and it's you can't tell what gets those stickers, and so a few of a weird thing. But the big fun was last December. They just came out of the blue on a business site saying they were going to do the future of Kickstarter was blockchain, and they're going to do open source. You know this. You should know this sort of stuff. It's out there.
It's one of those things that may or may not be a concern to you, of course. That's fine.
But the thing is, I think both me and Paul shared the view is it's not good. It's blockchain, very allied with cryptocurrency. I think a local guy who's now making virtual gaming experiences. He has a couple of rooms in an old warehouse near here, and he used to work in blockchain and cryptocurrency, and he used to sort of set up all the graphic cards, because the way that they sort of give value is that they mine the currency, and they do that by having rack upon racks of very hot, overclocked graphics card. He said you could just go in there. If you have a cold, you just go in there. So that's not on. That's deliberately. So they're chasing that rather than sort out their core business. Yeah. Apparently they are. I did a bit of digging. They're doing that because their competitors are other platforms that use blockchain. So if they don't invest in it, they feel the competitors are going to, and they lose business, and they'll eventually end up with nothing. Whereas I'm kind of like, from a web developer, and I've seen this before, why don't you just make your website easier and better to use? And that's what GameFound are doing. They're very open about it. And they've recently secured investment from, forget the board games and jigsaw people. I forget what they're called.
It's on the
Ravensburg or something like that. Yeah.
I nearly said Ravenloft. Yeah, that's not
it. But they've got sort of silly amounts of money, and they're obviously a major investment. So we are I am sort of taking a bit of chance. We've been working on this now probably for a good 5 years at least, and it is going to be, hopefully it's a big book. It's hopefully a big thing for D101. It's probably our biggest Kickstarter or biggest game since OpenQuest, which was it's a couple of years ago now. And that's where I want it to be, if not bigger. So we are taking a bit, but I think you backers, you'll find the website a lot nicer to look at and more informative. And it's certainly, I'm finding it a joy to work with in the back end. And
I'm hoping, yeah.
And once it finishes, it turns into a pledge manager. So if you're looking at this in August when we finish the crowdfunding campaign, hello, person from the future, you can go to the pledge manager, probably up until the point where I ship the books and buy the same sort of rewards, which is all great because it helps with funding the rest of it. And that will hopefully be a nice, smooth experience, because the main reason I've been staying with Kickstarter is you get used to these things and you go, oh, I have to do it as part of my workflow, roll out of bed, set up a Kickstarter. Now, hopefully that's going to be moved over to GameFound. So, yes. So, I think, anything else you'd like to say about the Beyond Dread Portals experience?
No, I mean, it's interesting. So sort of doing things like, say, at a recent convention I ran it, and it was just really cool. So,
yeah,
it just came out there as.
Yeah, it's the author of the game saying his game's cool.
Yeah, I'm saying my game's cool, but no, I mean, there's something that's sort of engaging about it.
I think this is the thing, right? I found it. I have played it myself. I played in Paul did a small campaign. It was kind of like an extended online adventure, wasn't it?
Yeah,
we enjoyed it. So we played online. That's the point. It is simple to play online. You don't need
absolutely.
a virtual tabletop.
So when I ran it at, I think it was Virtual Grog Meet. I mean, again, I did it with no for VTT. It was just saying, come on, just get your physical dice out. We'll play that way.
We might do some VTT stuff because I'm getting my head around Foundry at the moment for OpenQuest. So there'll definitely be a character sheet, and so there might be a bit of development to that front.
But that's, I mean, it's one of those things. There's something that's, if it's a bonus to you doing that, definitely use it, but you don't have to.
No. And I think there's also a thing with online play that I certainly find if there's too much going on, there's too much fiddly stuff to keep track, I get a bit overwhelmed and it's very uncomfortable. So there's none of that. It's fun to play. The setting, both of it. I start off with a very simple, this is what Yes is, this is what, the other world, off you go.
It's pretty clear actually how to sort of form adventures in terms of that. You're going through a portal to look at something or looking at something in this.
Yeah.
And go.
Yeah. And that's it. And there's lots of support in that. So Paul's run it. He ran this game for us. Might be interesting to see if we can get the players from that game. Jules, was it Jules?
Jules, Nigel, and Toro, wasn't it?
Yeah, and get them to. Because one thing we're not spoken about is how the characters, they have retained that. There's basically 3 classes. There's magician class. Is it the expert?
Yes, and the warrior.
And the warrior. So, and within each of those 3 main classes is are the backgrounds, and which guilds is it backgrounds that give guild
it's
membership?
Backgrounds, yes.
Yeah.
And then of course you can select certain special funky abilities.
Yeah. So
Not too
yeah,
many,
oh yeah.
but
So backgrounds is, which is kind of modern D fifth, isn't it? But it doesn't cascade into skills. It stops there. It's the bonus you get, say, +4 bonus, and it's the background. For instance, my character, we have Jules's character was a pirate, so anything to do with pirating, running about, swashing his buckle, whatever, drinking heavily, would come under the pirate background and get, I think it was a +4 bonus. And I think Tor was the magician type.
no, he was some
character.
sort of military scout type guy. I think Nigel was a
Right.
magician, and of course you had the
That's right,
dandified
yes.
noble, didn't you?
Yes, I had the flash heart, which was kind of like the character behind me. So I kind of, if you've watched Blackadder, I was sat there on afternoon. I thought, I didn't have much time, but I kind of twigged that one hand it was a handful of dice to wallop the characteristics, and I did that. And then I picked backgrounds, and I picked the fact he was a noble, and then I thought, hang about, let's just try and recreate Lord Flashheart for Blackadder 2. It wasn't my most creative moment, but it was a lot of fun in play. It was a lot of
but fun. That's the other thing. Again, like I say, the backgrounds are pretty flexible. So with the expert, you went for this sort of noble dandy.
Yeah.
Other people might be going for an assassin.
Tor, as you said, was the sort of scout. So it's basically the same character class. There was a bit of difference with the special abilities, though. That's where the sort of the second edition AD&D sort of influence comes in.
Yeah.
The classes have special abilities but you could pick which ones. They kind of explode a bit more as you go along. And so we never have that one of, like, so for instance, somebody's the warrior, which you used to get in old school games where, okay, people pick the warrior class or the fighter class, and there's very little to tell the two characters if somebody else has picked the same character class. But there isn't here. And very quickly, you have, if you're used to sort of more narrative, modern role-playing games, you have narrative hooks. If you're not, you'll get used to it because it's straightforward. And you have a bonus.
It's not a big sort of coercive thing, but the narrative hooks do give you bonuses, which are handy.
And they're fun to play with. Because I've played a lot of narrative games. I've played a lot of Hero Quest, which is Robin Law's game that he created for Galantha, but it then became sort of multi-genre. I've played a lot of that, and it kind of has that element of in there, but it has hit points and definite numbers to tie it in.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy with both. It's old school roots and other things in there. So I've run it a couple of times at convention. In fact, I've got one scenario which might see the light of day, and I've now run it about 4 times, and it's been fun. And it is handled everything from complex philosophical debates to sort of big fights, big sort of we're talking money combat, because D&D is good at that normally. But it kind of drags a bit. Didn't drag here. Because people running about intimidating people, jumping up buildings, getting advantages for height and all sorts of things.
It feels fairly dynamic, the combat. It's also over quite quickly.
Yeah.
So hit points are actually relatively low.
Right. So it plays well. So, it is, we're not talking about, I think that's been the big thing. Paul came up with a clever idea. We did have a couple of iterations where we bashed that clever idea into shape, and it has been.
Yeah, reviewed. I mean, the early versions were just way too complicated. It's not now. It's just sort of, we don't need that. Let's strip it out.
Yeah, but it plays well, and it has been quite ruthlessly play tested.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did kind of think, do we need to have to, because it's been a while since we have the play test. And because it's long developing, it has meandered a bit. But I sort of gave another run at Virtual Grog Meet, and no, it still just hums along.
It's good. Just play. Do we still like it? Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
that was the test.
And
really,
the point is that I'm, as part of this, I'm paying Paul what they call all rights to the game. So if I want to do anything with the games engine coming forward, And I've got a couple of ideas already. I think this will be D101's sort of level class system that we use for other things. Got an idea. I suppose it's because of the roughs, but I did a adventure. It's set in the Jacobean period. That's just the end of right after Elizabeth I. Her reign comes to an end, and we have King James I, called The Road to Hell. And I've already run a couple of follow-up adventures and conventions where I've used the system, which we're kind of calling the Portal system, Portal D20. And I'm also kind of thinking, sort of either Crypts and Things second edition or a new game using the same setting but with a different name. Again, might use the system. So it's quite flexible. So even if you think, I tend to use my own settings, my own adventures, it's still worth buying the book to get a bunch of ideas and use the base system.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the idea of it, really, isn't it? It's just a bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
Hopefully it hangs together well, but the ideas are the fun ones.
So I think we've now been wishing on quite a while. So,
well, I think it was coming to an end when I said you should buy this game because it's cool. That's not really.
So that's the subtle one for the future. The future of these is like, and I thought, I felt in the need to sort of jump in and say it's not just something. This is not just an academic exercise that it has been play tested.
That's quite serious.
And there's a bunch of blog posts about it that have been written probably kind of over the years, because there's been a few false starts, but we're doing it this month. No, we're not. This time we really are. So 1st of June. If you look at this in YouTube, there'll be lots of links to blog posts and the rest of it, and hopefully as well by soon to the link to the game found page, landing page for it. So hope to see you on the Kickstarter. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Newt, and thanks everyone out there for listening.
Even if you're in the future.
Even in the future.
Well,
they will be in the future, right? Because we're not showing it live.
Yeah. Okay. Take care. Right. Thanks very much, everyone.